Okay, it's live. It's all yours, Linda.
Okay, so it's my very big pleasure to introduce Judith who will be introducing Esti Katz, as she knows her very well. Judith.
Okay, hello everyone. So yesterday was Rachel Shaul from Staten Island. Today it's Esti Katz from Staten Island. So I guess we are on the map. So we live in Staten Island, as you know. So I met Esti. We have a local chat and WhatsApp chat, and we exchange things. So once somebody posts the name of a book and asks something about it, I don't exactly remember what, but the book was Look at Me Now. And she was asking if somebody has it, whatever the question was. And Esti Katz, I've seen her before on the chat. I didn't know who she was. And she says, I am Rivka from the book of Look at Me Now. And I said, wow, so I asked and I read the book. It was just unbelievable. And then Esti spoke to us one Friday night, we have, in the winter when the evenings were long, we had these evenings arranged at Aguda, and she was one of our speakers. And her story is just unbelievable. So let me just read the official bio that I was given. So around 10 years ago, I saw and felt the need in our community to help and inspire young adults, especially girls probably. The kids at risk population was overwhelming, a part of at least one friend you knew. After reaching out to the local Besyakov teachers, my speaking career took off. What ended up happening was that adults were hearing my story and my audience grew. Everyone, everywhere is looking to be inspired. They are going through all types of trying situations and are looking how to have a positive outlook and a more positive life. My personal story clearly shows how everything is from the hand of Hashem. If you ever doubted it, hear my story and understand the true meaning of the word Pesher. So my hearing Esti and knowing her a little bit, we meet in stores occasionally also and say hello. It's like how she was able to turn around her suffering, her neglect since she was a young girl. I mean, I don't want to say too much to tell us her story, and turn around everything and not hold a grudge around any of her step brothers and sisters, half brothers and sisters. I mean, the big family that she has, or her parents, and just come to terms with it and just love everyone. So you talk about, Rabbi Arush's project of Ahavat Israel, the one that we encourage so much. I mean, she started it years ago, and she went to Beis Yaakov, gave up her car, and encouraged girls who had certain issues to call her, and she was able to help a lot of people. So that's one thing. The other thing is it's always fascinating to me how Ribono Shel Olam always magdim et hatrufa lemaka. He creates the solution, before the problem, and how he prepared this wonderful Hasidic of all people, an old Hasidic couple, Hasidic family that took her in and gave her the love that she was yearning for, and all that. And I mean, her story is just fascinating. So I don't want to say too much. And with that, Esti, you are on.
Thank you, Judith. Esti, let's see if we can hear you. Are you there, Esti? Sorry, ladies, we seem to have a little bit of a problem with the audio. Just ask your indulgence for a few moments more because Esti's trying to dial in.
Yeah, I saw her before, but now I don't.
She was on with her video, but now she's trying to get on so we can hear her. Esti, do you hear us? Yeah, it's connecting to audio, I saw. There we are. Esti? Nomi? I see Esti's on, but the phone doesn't seem to be, it's like marked down. Nomi, do you know, Nomi Bhatia, do you know what to do? If you see Esti's on, but there's a line through the phone. Esti, if you hear me, could you activate your audio on the phone? Unmute her. It doesn't let me. It hasn't got it on that. I don't know if I'm a host.
Let her unmute on her side.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we hear.
Baruch Hashem, yes, you're loud and clear.
Oh, good. There you are, Esti. Welcome.
Hodu Lashem Kito Kili Olam Chasto. Everybody can hear me, right?
Yes, go ahead. We're with you.
Okay, let me get started because I feel like I've been holding everybody hostage over here because I'm obviously not Zoom proficient. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Judith, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. As Judith said, I took my story public. I wrote a book called Look at Me Now. We use pseudonyms, so I am in fact Rivka Weiss in the book, and it was written by Miriam Weiser, who is a wonderful author who has published other books as well. And the books are available in Jewish bookstores or on Amazon, things like that. With that being said, I will just start by saying really quickly, because of the limited time, that the reason I took my story public was because I had seen an article in a little magazine that prompted me to want to help teenagers that were going through situations in their own home, in their own life. And it kind of exploded because women and men alike actually were being inspired, were feeling a sense of hope from my story. And so my parents knew. My mother passed away a couple of years ago, but my parents know about the book. My rabbi knew about the book. My husband, everybody knew about the book. It really, we use pseudonyms for just whatever purposes, but not because we were hiding it from them. This was not chas v'shalom, even though it's a story about my life and I talk about my parents. I did it very gently, and it's chas v'shalom, not meant to be disrespectful, but it is meant to help people in the climate of the world right now with kids at risk and people going through so many different situations that there was a need for my story to go public, to give people hope and to make people understand that everything is min shemayim and that giving up should not even be in your compass of thinking. You should just try to persevere and be positive and get help and whatever. With that being said, I was a little girl living in Borough Park, Brooklyn, to regular Jewish Orthodox parents, no special affiliation to any Hasidus, to any rabbi, just regular Shomer Shabbos Orthodox Jews. I was going to Beis Yaakov of Brooklyn. My parents had a very tumultuous marriage. We're fighting all of the time. I had one sister who was 21 months younger than me, and for all intents and purposes, I was acting like her mother. My mother really wasn't capable of being a mother. There were so many problems in the marriage and so many problems within herself that, of course, I did not know as a young child and did not become aware of until later in life. And my reality, even though I wasn't being treated like your average child, I didn't, I guess, realize that there was a problem because this was my norm. And when you don't know different, you don't realize that there is a problem. So by the time I'm 7 years old, I'm already in my second school in Brooklyn. My mother switched me out after fourth grade to a different Beis Yaakov. We're still living in Borough Park. But by the time I'm 7, she gets divorced from my father. It was a horrible end. There was police. It was not pretty. And my mother had a brother living in Muncie, and my uncle told her that it would be a really good idea for her to move and to start fresh somewhere after the divorce. My mother fought for custody for us. My father was still in Brooklyn. My father was never really capable of making a living. This was a very big reason for their divorce. It also caused many, many problems as the years went on, because he was, for all intents and purposes, what is referred to as a layitzlach, just could not make a living. He was not necessarily a bad person, but just could not earn a living, and the relationship with him and my mother was absolutely awful. He was also not the kind of person to be on time, and so on weekends that he would have visitation with us, we would be standing waiting around for him to come. And I can't tell you how children feel very unloved when a parent who's going to see them just for an alternate weekend doesn't manage to be on time to come pick them up and spend time with them. With that being said, we moved to Muncie, and I go into my third school. I go into Yeshiva Spring Valley. By the time I am 9.5 years old, my mother has been introduced to a man who is 17 years her senior. And this man has absolutely no sort of similarity in his background than my mother. My mother went to Beis Yaakov of Williamsburg. She lived in Washington Heights. She came from a Yekisha family. This man was nothing like that. He wasn't always from. I believe his children had joined NCSY, and so he jumped on the bandwagon and became Shomer Shabbos. But he was older than my mother and with no similar backgrounds. He also had custody of the 6 children from his first marriage. And one of the things that is most important to mention is that he was one of the cheapest people on the face of the earth. And my mother, unfortunately, and again, I wasn't aware of all of her issues that she had, all of her mental issues, but was not an honest person, and told my stepfather that money would come to support my sister and I. And this is relevant because the suffering that I went through, that we went through, but that I went through even more, because this was not true, because my mother said this untruth about money coming, is beyond comprehension. Everything in the house became his food. Using the water in the house was a problem because there's water bills. Using electricity was a problem because I was using his electric, whether it was watching TV, whether it was plugging in a blow dryer, using my radio. It really didn't make a difference because it was costing him money. And this was a tremendous problem. And on top of that, I was a heavyset child because I found comfort in food. And all of his furniture was more precious to him than clearly I was. And I was constantly being told that I was too fat to sit on the couch. And I was constantly being emotionally or mentally abused by this man. And also my mother too, because my mother was really more focused on being the great stepmom. He had custody of his 6 kids, 5 girls and a boy. They did not all live in the house, but some of them did. I was just turning 10 years old when they got married. Shortly thereafter, when I am going into 7th grade, my stepfather decides that he does not want me living with them anymore because it's costing him money. The checks were never coming that my mother said would. Till this day, I don't understand why an intelligent man like he was supposed to be would not work this out with my mother, but instead chose to emotionally, abuse me instead of dealing with it in his marriage. Instead, I was told that I couldn't live there that year, and I was sent to live with my father. And I went to school that year in Chicago. You may be asking why Chicago. It happens to be that year my father did get a job working in Dubuque, Iowa, and he was mashgiach at a shlachtos. I'm sure everybody knows the story of Rabashkin, and so that's where my father was. But there was no Yiddish community over there, and so the shachtim and the mashgichim had to take the 4-hour drive to Chicago for Shabbos, and my father had a very small basement there, and that's where I joined him for Shabbos. And so he put me with a woman who I didn't know, where I lived during the week. I went to Beis Yaakov of Chicago. I was miserable. I was trying to literally deal with the fact that I was tossed around like a human basketball, that parents were not taking care of me, were not loving me. It was a very harsh reality for a little kid. I was just 11 going on 12 that year. Try to picture, me being sent on a plane by myself, going to a woman who I didn't even know, never met before, living with her and her daughter. She was an almana. She was a very nice lady, but I was very young and did not appreciate any of this at that age. With that being said, after 7th grade, I believe that summer I spent it with my father in Dubuque. It was lonely. I believe at some point my sister may have come out to join me. That summer's a little fuzzy. When I got back from the summer after 7th grade, I overheard my stepfather and my mother talking about me being put into public school. I actually went over to my mother and grabbed her physically, and I was bawling, crying bitter tears that she should not let my stepfather put me in public school, because at this point I'm thinking it's all him. I didn't realize that my mother was along for the ride on every single thing, because her only focus was being his good wife and his children's good stepmother. During this time, they were also having children. My mom had 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, together with my stepfather. And I used to love answering the question when people ask me, they get to meet you and get to know you, and they're like, do you have any siblings that live here? Do you have a sister that went there? And my favorite was always saying that I had 5 stepsisters, a stepbrother, 2 half-sisters, 2 half-brothers, and a sister. So yeah, that was a fun point for me, actually, just answering that question of like, where are you from and who else would I know from your family? I ended up going to public school. It was horrifying for me as a Beis Yaakov girl to be put in a school where we're basically taught not to socialize with non-Jewish people and things like that. And here I'm going to school with them every day. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, that I had a guidance counselor that year, Mr. Tilton, and I spent plenty of time in his office, and I found 2 girls who were Jewish, and I managed to get through the year. This point, after every single school year, I don't even need to repeat it, my stepfather told me I'm done with camp and I need to find a job. So from the time I was 12 years old, I've been working every single summer. My job started out, obviously I was working in the summer in the Catskills. Well, not obviously, but I was working in the Catskills. I was sent away from home. That's the part that's obviously, because nobody wanted me there. And I went and worked for people that were taking advantage of me because I was so young. And they hired me telling me I'm going to take care of 1 little kid, and I was taking care of 4. These moms were going back to Brooklyn for their shopping days and leaving me with the full responsibility of 4 little kids the entire day. And I called up my mom and I said, they're taking advantage of me and I have to do this, and the other thing. And she's like, well, I'm sorry, you can't come home. And she hung up the phone on me. So yeah. And even at this point, I just did not realize how I'm not being loved and I'm not being taken care of. But it soon became very clear when I came home from my first job and my money was used to pay for school supplies and just everything, female needs, whatever you think your mom would take care of you when you're 12 years old, I was taking care of it myself. My mother did not care about anything. In fact, my 12th grade yearbook picture, because this was the story of my life throughout all of my schooling, my 12th grade yearbook picture, I am in a nightshirt, which I was able to afford because it was very cheap, sold at a very cheap store for $9.99. I got it in blue and pink because without having a mother that raises you and teaches you and shops for you and you develop a style, I had absolutely none of that. So in my young mind, I'm like, okay, this isn't bad. And I bought 2 of them because they were $10 and I could afford it since I was paying for everything by myself. And yep, my yearbook picture, I'm in a nightshirt. With that being said, after the summer, I come home, 9th grade. I'm told that my stepfather doesn't want me living there again. And I was sent to live with my father. My father was living in Borough Park at the time, Borough Park, Brooklyn, for those that who don't know where Borough Park is, in New York. And I literally would walk into the apartment and you flipped open the lights. You would see about 100 million, this is not an exaggeration, water bugs run home. It was grotesque. My father, unfortunately, was really never capable of making a living. And so he was living in the proverbial dump, as they would call it. I had absolutely no idea at that time what Tomchei Shabbos was. but a box of food was showing up at the door on Thursday night. Clearly, whoever the organization or whoever had, told them that my father needs food did not know 2 girls were living with him. My sister came that year as well. And so there was not enough food for us. It was a horrible, horrible situation. That year, my father introduced me to a woman who would soon become his second wife. And I was really hoping, after having the horrible stepfather experience, that maybe she would be the Yeshua. I used to lay in bed and I used to cry and I used to ask Hashem, please get me out of this situation. Please, I couldn't take it. I really couldn't take it, and I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about anything, or I would get in terrible, terrible trouble. And I was really hoping that she would be the lovely woman. But unfortunately, even one evening when my father took me over to meet her, I was sent back to Borough Park, and she lived in a different community. I was sent back to Borough Park at night in a yellow cab all by myself. This is before the times of cell phones and beepers and things like that, where you could tell your child, I'll be with you, whatever the case is. I was just sent home alone, not cared for, not loved. And that was this was literally the gist of my entire childhood. From the time my parents divorced, I was not taken care of. I was not loved. I was mentally abused. I was a second thought to every single person in my life. I didn't matter to anybody. I know people question grandparents. My father's parents were not involved. And my mother's parents were the type where they came from a generation where talking about your parents was equivalent to Lashon Hara. And so if I would ever even say a boo to my grandmother, she would be like, no, so there was no talking to anybody. No teacher ever saw the way I looked. I mean, I was not dressed well, to say the least. No one called me over, asked me if anything was wrong. In fact, this next year in 10th grade, where no parent wants us, not my father and stepmother, not my stepfather and mother, so we're sent to Worcester, Massachusetts to go to school together. My sister and I were not always together, but this year we were. And we go to Worcester, Massachusetts without anything. My mother did not even prepare me with the proper kinds of coat that you would need in a winter in Massachusetts. Thank God there was a girl with a lot of money who had multiples of everything and shared. And I will not ever forget this girl, because I think I survived the winter over there because of her. When I got back from 10th grade, again, after the job, I was told that I'm being put in public school again. My stepfather would always tell me that I'm too stupid to pay tuition for. To give you just an example, I always want to pick one story. I'm not here to, in Yiddish, the word is bashmitz. I'm not really here to sully the names of these people. I'm really trying to give a whole different message here. But I just want to explain what I went through so that you get a really good idea, aside from all the fat things that he said to me and all the degrading comments and not being able to eat his food and not use his electric. He would also, if you weren't on the same page as him in reference to anything, it was a horrible thing. Education, it didn't matter. I came home one day from a performance in 8th grade. I had no choice but to be a part of a performance with boys and girls, excuse me. And I came home and I saw a dog running around on the property. And I'm from Brooklyn, and Brooklynites are generally afraid of dogs. Excuse me. And I ran up to my room, and my stepfather wasn't having it because he was a dog person. The next thing I knew, the door to my room was thrown open. My stepfather grabbed me by my hair, pulled me down the steps outside on the back porch, put the dog in my lap. The dog was biting me and licking me, and I was crying hysterical because I was afraid. He smacked me 3 times across the face, and then he let me go back to my room. And my mother was actually standing there and unfortunately enjoying the moment. And I think it basically depicts my childhood, because there was abuse in one way or another all the time. Even sending away your kids without so much as I love you, call me, I want to know everything is okay, is just, it's awful, even without everything else. Baruch Hashem, Hashem is so good that in middle of 11th grade in public school, my aunt, my mother's brother, a different one, not the Muncie brother, found out that I was in public school, told my mother's parents about it, and they agreed to pay tuition for me to finish school in a Jewish school in Suffern, which is right on the outskirts of Muncie. And I finished 11th and 12th grade there. The thing was that in 12th grade, I finished school at 3 o'clock. So my stepfather was forcing me to get a job after school. And I went and tried to get an apartment and move out of the house. If I was already making some money, maybe I can get away on my own. I had a girlfriend that was also going through a lot of trouble. And so we tried to do an apartment. It didn't end up working for her. And so since I couldn't carry the apartment financially all by myself, I ended up moving back home. And when I moved back home, my stepfather demanded rent from me to continue living with him and my mother. So I'm a 17-year-old girl going to school, working part-time. And then when I come home, I have to hand my stepfather money to continue living there when basically I had less than a meal a day and maybe a shower. And so I gave him $175. I believe this was 1986. It was a lot of money then. And I went upstairs to my room and I heard him tell my mother it's not enough. I was absolutely horrified. I honestly sometimes think back that I don't even know how I got through this. Hashem clearly made me one strong individual. I don't think I gave myself enough credit. And then Hashem is so good, and this is the part of my story that I absolutely love, because after I graduated from 12th grade, it's time for me to look for a job. And like all the girls in Muncie, there were really no business opportunities, job opportunities back then. And so I looked in Manhattan, I combed the papers, and one day I found a job, and I went to the city on day one as a bookkeeper in an office, and they give me the simplest task to re-add just a receipt of numbers, a very long receipt at that, but just to re-add in and see that our totals match. I can't tell you how many times I did it and the totals never matched. And so it was Hashem telling me this is not for you, because it was literally the simplest thing, and how could anybody screw it up? I wasn't doing it in my head. I was using a machine. And so that didn't work out. And then I tried multiple jobs and none of them worked out. I tried in the Diamond District and none of them were working out. And so I found myself without a job. And again, I'm a modern girl. And my mother tells me that there's a takeout food store, Hasidic owners, and they're looking for somebody to work the afternoons. And how do I prep myself to go for this interview? I put on some skirt that I probably paid $8 for, and a men's V-neck undershirt, and put on tons of makeup and gelled my hair up. And I walk into this store, the nicest Bells Hasidim, nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. And they hired me on the spot. I had no idea they knew anything about me. And I started working there and developing a relationship with them. And of course, I changed the way I dressed because I just had a respect for them. And Hashem gave me something I call eigen seichel, which means you have your own common sense. It's not something taught. It's just something that you know. It's ingrained in you. I think I got it from my Beis Yaakov days. And I started dressing more respectfully because I respected them so much. And so shortly after going there, and I think that they got a clue about what I was dealing with somewhat at home, although not everything. I would go walk down to them on a Shabbos afternoon. They had a daughter still living at home. They would invite me for a Shabbos meal. And the daughter was older than me, by the way, and I would join her. We would go to the nursing home on a Shabbos afternoon to visit the elderly. And I became really like one of the family. I became like one of the family.
Sorry, Charlene, please mute yourself. I can't mute you.
So this family and I became very close, and it came to a point when I was at home that it became even worse, the situation where my sister and I were not even welcome to sit at a Shabbos meal in our own house with our own mother. I would come home Friday from work, and I would bring cake and I would bring soda, and my sister and I would stay in our bedroom in the dark because electricity costs money, and we would be there unless we needed the ladies' room, till Sunday morning usually. And that is how we survived for quite a while. And then we would make plans and go away for Shabbos and things like that so we could experience a normal Shabbos. Not every week, but we tried. It came time for Yom Tovim, Pesach in particular of this year. I'm sorry I'm speeding up the story, but there's a time refrain here, so I'm just picking things up a little bit. But it came to a Pesach. I was 18 years old. My sister was 16. And we made plans to go away because we were not welcome home on Yontif at all. Not to stay in our dark room with cake and soda, but not at all to be in the house for a Yontif. And I made plans to go to my mom's brother in Brooklyn. My sister was going to a cousin elsewhere. We were going to meet back up in Monsey for Chol HaMoed. And then we were going our respective places for the second days. And I was thrilled beyond words to be invited to my Sable family, my boss, for the second days of Pesach. They couldn't have me the first days because they Kanai have a huge family, and all of their family was there for the first days, and there was literally no room for me. They had grandchildren sleeping on rollout mattresses on the floor. So I go to Brooklyn. My sister goes to her place. We meet back up in Monsey after Yontif, the morning after, and I called my mother from the bus stop, and I said, "Hi, can you please come pick us up?" And she said, "No, you can't come home." And she hung up the phone on us. I called my uncle where I had been for the first days of Yontif, and I told him my mother won't let me come in. He said, "Hatzlacha," and he hung up the phone on me. Called my uncle. Remember the uncle that said it would be a really nice idea for my mom to move to Monsey and raise us there? And called him. He said, "I'm sorry, I can't get involved," and he hung up the phone on us. So I called up my Sable family, my boss, and I said, "Listen, I don't want to get you involved or anything, but I need a ride." This is way before the days of Ubers and all of that. Monsey was quiet. Not a car could be seen on the streets, Chalamite. And so I asked my Sables if somebody could give me a ride to my mom. And so they had a son that was there from Canada, and he came to pick us up in his tiny little car together with his sister that was still single and living at home. And they took us to my mom, and he gets out of the car. And I didn't know that he knows my parents. My mother and my stepfather used to illegally rent cars, meaning that for people that couldn't go to a Hertz or a regular place to rent a car because of the IDs that you need or the credit or whatever it was. So my stepfather would buy used and expensive cars, and he would rent them out to people. And I didn't know that Mr. Sable's son Yankee had once rented a car from my stepfather. So he knew my mom. So he gets out of the car, all huffy and puffy, and he was like, "Mrs. Whatever, what are you doing to your girls?" And she said, "I'm sorry, Yankee, they know that they can't come in." And basically, we did not end up getting back in the house. I told him I didn't know any such thing. Chalamoid was not the beautiful Yontif that we all have on Chalamoid, that we go visit grandparents, or we go to the zoo, or we picnic, or however we spend our family time at Chalamoid. This was not the situation in my house. So even though my sister and I knew that we were not welcome home on a Yontif, this was not a Yontif in our house. My mother was back doing laundry. My stepfather was at work. There was no reason to believe for 1 second that we couldn't come in the house. With that being said, we go back to the Sables. They have absolutely no way of helping us. We decided to call the police because no family would get involved. The Sables didn't know what to do with us. We had nowhere to go. We would literally have been left without a roof over our head. And we called the police. The police come, take our story. They take us down to the police station. They call my mother shortly thereafter and tell her that they have 2 girls there and what the story is. And she's like, "Oh, no, officer, please bring them right home." And she played the loving, concerned mother. And till this day, I don't understand how all of that played out. Like, you have 2 girls that are telling you, till this day, I just don't understand it. The police ended up taking us home because my mother said that we were welcome. And when we got there, my mother was sitting outside and she told us to go to her parents. Her parents were staying by the Muncie uncle, their son, and it was right near my mom. So we dropped our luggage, walked over. My uncle had the biggest, most beautiful expanse of a house. We sat there, two little girls on his big white leather sofa. I'll never forget it. Everybody sitting around, my grandparents like at the head, like as if, you're going to visit the king and the queen, and like they're sitting in those beautiful, big, gorgeous thrones, and everybody just yelling at us, them, my uncle, that how we had the chutzpah to mess with my mother's life. And whatever she had done to us meant absolutely nothing. In that moment, we were the chutzpahniaks, the disrespectful kids that had the audacity to call police, knowing that my stepfather was well known in the community and how this might reflect on him. No one in that moment could care less about the fact that my sister and I would have been left without a roof over our head, or that your daughter was not going to let us in our house, or maybe what's been going on all of these years with my grandchildren, with my niece, with my cousin. Nothing. I walked out of there and I was very emotional. And really, I was never emotional other than in my pillow when I was begging Hashem to just send me a Yeshua, because I was kind of always being my sister's mom, because she didn't have one and she needed one. Her being almost 2 years younger than me, I naturally slid into mom mode. I mean, I was taking care of the 4 kids that my mom had with my stepfather. She wasn't interested in raising them either. With that being said, we go back to the house. We get through Holocaust. My sisters made her arrangements for the second days of Pesach, and mine were to go to the Sables. Mr. Sable comes and he picks me up. And although he was communicating with me in Yiddish, I'll give it over to you in English. He tells me, excuse me, on our way over to his house, you can't live with such a mother. I said, I know, but what should I do? And before I could even finish my sentence, he tells me that he has a room. He lives in a 2-family house. He lives upstairs, and there's a room downstairs that he pays the owner of the house an extra $100 so that they could siphon off this other room, and he could have an office and a spare bedroom. And he's like, I thought for sure he's offering it to me for the $100, and I'm like jumping. I'm like, sure, I'll give you the $100, no problem, absolutely. And I'm getting so excited, like Hanukkah. And he says, no, take $50. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he wants to split it with me. That's so nice. And he's like, no, take $50 from all the money that you earn. Because at that point, I already had so much free time in the morning because the job started in the afternoon that I got another job in the morning. He's like, no, take all the money you earn, put it away except for $50. That keep on you for spending money. Because he had the foresight to know that I was going to need to support myself and take care of myself and maybe even marry myself off. I moved into this family 30 seconds after walking in the door, the Erev, second days of Pesach. I was in a new outfit, which, if you heard my story, nobody bought me anything from the time I was a working girl at 11 before my 12th birthday. She had bought her daughter a beautiful skirt and a top that didn't look good on her and was due to go back to the store, and she had it on me in 30 seconds. And then she had me in the kitchen helping her cook for Pesach, and it was Candyland. It was joy. People ask me if I needed therapy to get over everything that I went in my childhood, and I'm like, I had my therapy, and it's called Stables. I was a part of the family, literally. This is not even an exaggeration, 30 seconds after walking into the door. I was in a new outfit. I was cooking in the kitchen, and I'm like, this is what I want. This is the life that I want. And from that moment on, I was dressing completely more tznius, although I did before anyway, but for sure living in their house. Mr. Sable had no idea what chinuch I got at home, so he taught me only about Nagel Wasser. One of the concerns my father-in-law had when he first met me was, if I was forced into this new Hasidic way of life because I was living with the Sable family, and Mr. Sable was very proudly able to tell my future father-in-law at the time that the only thing he told me about was Negel Wasser, that everything that I had made of my life was by my own doing and by my own choice. Unfortunately, a year after moving into the house, and when I moved in, I left my TV and my radio at home. And those were things that really got me through very tough times at home. I was very into the music on the radio, and I was very into TV. I would get lost in TV shows, and it was a way that I dealt with the stress of my life. I literally thought I would grow up to be the next Whitney Houston, who is a non-Jewish singer, for those of you who don't know. A year after moving into the house, Mrs. Sable was hospitalized. And on the morning, it was the Shabbos after Pesach a year later. And on that morning, that Shabbos morning, it was my turn to walk to the hospital. And we got the phone call that she had passed away. And I felt as if the world had sunk. Sorry, I never fail to get emotional. Well, I give over this part because it has impacted my life till today. She was the most amazing woman ever. When I would diet, when I would exercise, she would look at me like, with such admiration, how I could move like that, being a heavy-set person. I mean, but she said it with admiration. It was not said in any negative sort of way at all. And she was my mother. For all intents and purposes, she loved me like a child is loved by their mother their entire life. And Hashem, and this is where I constantly try to drill into people how things are bashert. I had no idea that my future mother-in-law had worked for Mr. and Mrs. Sable in Canada. And so when the family was sitting Shiva now, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law came to be Menachem Avel. And here I am, 33 years later, almost having my 33rd anniversary this summer with my husband. And if that is not the most utmost proof about how things are bashert, it's mind-blowing to me. It is mind-blowing. I have two beautiful children, Kanai Nahara. My daughter married a Satmar boy from Muncie 13 years ago. I have grandchildren. My son just turned 20, Hanukkah time, so we're in Shadichim for him. And my husband is a wonderful person. And who would have thunk when I talk about my childhood that this is where I would be today? And if it doesn't prove to people the hand of Hashem and that your tefillos are heard, you may think that because they're not answered immediately that Hashem doesn't hear you, but it's not true. Hashem works at his own schedule. And never did it cross my mind to leave Yiddishkeit, and never did it cross my mind to do things that you see kids doing today, which is why I felt so prompted to take my story public, because I want to give people hope and inspire people that, yes, you could be going through very tough times. I validate it. It's true. But how is going off the derech going to help you? I really try to be understanding, and chas v'shalom, never judgmental, but to try to show people the beauty of my life. I have zero regrets about going the Hasidish route. My life is beautiful. I live in a wonderful community today in Staten Island, and I have friends, and all of my Sable families are forever people. Once I got married, it didn't end. I met all the simchas, and we don't even tell the story anymore. We're just sister and brother, and the daughter that was still living at home then when I moved in, lives in Israel now, and we talk. If God forbid, if I even sneeze, she'll call me 10 times a week to see how I'm feeling. The love and attention and acceptance and being part of a family that I got after moving in with this family, so makes up for everything that I went through. Hashem is just so good. This is chas v'shalom not meant to make my parents look in a bad light. My mom knew about the book. My father knew about the book. My rabbi knows about the book. The book was done very gently. The Look at Me Now book, again, written by Miriam Weiser. It's an incredible story. There's lots more information in the book. It's available on Amazon, possibly Barnes & Noble. And I also want to thank you, ladies. I don't know if I've run over my time, but I want to thank you all for listening to my story. I can be contacted. Many people have my contact information, Judith and Linda. And I thank you all so much for giving me this opportunity to tell my story this morning.
Well, Esti, like everyone
Yes.
I'm trying to find the words. I'm at an absolute loss for what you've been through and how you survived and how you've thrived and how you've held on to your emunah in Hashem is something that made this time with you so worthwhile for all of us. I want to say that I feel so ashamed that this could have happened, and yet so filled with admiration how you prevailed against all odds. And indeed, this is a mussar for all of us on this group who, Mina Shamayim, heard this story. And so many people I know are going to buy your book and feel with you and feel how you are who you are, which is astounding. Just the one word you said now, that you say to someone, what are you going to achieve by going off the derech? So I just want to say on behalf of all of us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bless you, that your life should continue in the way it is, in goodness and positivity, and that you should continue inspiring many, many people. And I'm so sorry that you had to endure what you did, and Baruch Hashem, it's going in the way that it is. So on behalf of all of us, I just say thank you, and God bless you. Thank you, ladies.
Amen.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing, Esti. Amazing.